everybody. Hello and welcome. This is technically session 4, world building session 4 for RollPlay, Far Verona. We're going to be doing some GM stuff. Thank you for coming. Today we're taking it back. Today we're taking it way back to the origins of this whole situation. Me doing GM stuff on the internet, because today is the very first filling of the faction turn spreadsheet. So we're going to talk a little bit before we get to all that, or before I start revealing all the secret knowledge. We're going to talk about the faction turn. What is it? What are we going to be doing? What is the purpose of it? Why the spreadsheets? What the hell is going on? So the faction turn is really why I got started doing anything on Twitch or on YouTube. The faction turn is the reason why I am a content creator, really, when it comes down to it. Because way back when, old it me JP, back when JP and I first started talking about tabletop stuff on Twitch, he'd been doing roleplay for a little while. I got introduced to it because the crew was playing Dungeon World, and I made part of that game. And JP and I were talking, and JP was like, "Oh, do you want to run a show? Do you want to run a game?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, hell yeah, of course, totally, I would love to. I want to run a sci-fi game because I love sci-fi. This is a thing that is true about me. Fantasy is great and all, but sci-fi is this is where I live. Sci-fi is my shit. Spaceships, androids, laser pistols. I'm all about it. That's my jam." So I was like, "All right, man, I want to run a sci-fi game. You get me players. I will buy a mic and I will buy a webcam, and I will do this thing on the internet. But you gotta let me play Stars Without Number. That's the game. That's my game. All right." Because at the time, Stars Without Number was a game that John Harper had introduced me to, and I had been talking about kind of online a little bit. And I had been hearing a bunch of stories. I was in the middle of kind of playing a game at home of Stars Without Number with some friends. And I was like, yeah, no, I want to play this. I want to play this on the internet. And the reason that I wanted to do that was because I wanted to show you the faction turn. Because I was thinking like, okay, while we're doing this other show on my own channel, I want to show people what the background stuff looks like. I want to show people the tools that are available to them as game masters. And this game has, hands down, one of my favorite game master tools. When people ask me like, what's a game that will give you good stuff to do as the GM, my go-tos are always Apocalypse World for fronts, and then this bad boy for the faction turn. So the faction turn is a way to provide me as a game master with a realistic feeling, above the PC, ongoing, moving world, right? We often play games. I'm thinking about a game like, Shadowrun, where Shadowrun has the various mega corporations, and we know that the mega corporations are always at each other's throats. They're always fighting, right? This is the same as like Vampire, Werewolf. We have the tribes and the clans, and you know that Clan Ventru and Clan La Sombra are always plotting against one another, but those games, Shadowrun and Vampire, and like most of those other games, they don't give you tools to organize that. They say, okay, GM, you just make up your own thing, right? Like do the thing. You have to make it up yourself. It's all GM fiat. If you want to decide that one corporation beats another one off screen, you really only have two choices, right? You can do it yourself, or you can play it out. And there's very little that I hate more than, like, in Dungeons & Dragons, having two NPC groups fighting each other just so I can figure out who wins. So some games, like Apocalypse World, have general terminology for how to handle this, right? Like how to disclaim that responsibility. But I like Stars Without Number because it gives you the faction turn to literally just play that stuff out. And so you build the factions, and you give them tools to act against one another. And for Swansong, we kind of did that. I did that out in the open, but it was all still me. It was me playing the game by myself, which was fun and cool. And it was great to be able to do that and to have y'all there to help me do math. but I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to turn over more of that power to you, to the audience, because the audience was getting invested not only in the player's behavior and the player's actions, but in the actions of the faction turn. They were getting attached to, like, who does not remember the great struggles of Oninsa Libre, right? And their slow shift into Oninsa Muerte, right? The way that the faction turns operated on their own as a separate thing was one really cool thing. And then the other thing is that it creates an environment in which I will always have exciting stuff to put into my game. So as we play and as things happen in the big scale, it'll affect the small scale of the game. And as you learned from watching Swansong, the small scale can result in action against the big scale. So if the PCs blow up a factory or destroy the surface of a planet by accident, etc., that will affect the faction turn as well. So, these are things that will flow back and forth. And like with everything else in the game, the purpose is to prompt creativity, right? It's to give us cool reasons to do stuff. And one of the things that I really liked about the faction turn was that we could tell a story over the course of a year of what happened to the universe, right? This was our larger thing. Now, this isn't like brand new in gaming. When I think about these kinds of systems, my mind often goes to, and you might already be familiar with this if you're a fan of Matt Colville's. I'm sure he's talked about it. The way that the L5R, Legend of the Five Rings card game, and the way that the card game tournaments played out would affect the fiction for the campaign setting, the official campaign setting of Legend of the Five Rings, Rokugan, over the course of the next year. So the 2002 L5R card game tournament, if the Crab Clan won that tournament, then they in fiction they would be in a much better position going into the next year. So there was a crossover there that I thought was really unique and interesting. And for us, because our tools are not card game tournaments, our tools are a Discord server and nearly 3,000 members of that Discord server and the factions. And you are now going to play this game. I gotta say, the thing that really inspired this whole thing, the reason why I'm doing this, and I gotta give proper shout outs where they deserve to be given. I've told this story before. I was in a class in high school in 11th and 12th grade called Comparative Civilizations. And my teacher for Comparative Civilizations was a rad dude named Mr. Todd, Hot Rod Todd, we used to call him. And Mr. Todd, he had a game every year that we would play. So when you started, you got essentially a faction. You were given a country, and we played a 30-player game of diplomacy, and it took all year. Every week we would submit our orders to Mr. Todd, and every weekend at the end of the day on Friday, when the school closed, Mr. Todd would execute the orders, and then we would all show up on Monday and obsessively pore over like what had happened on the map. And that was one of my favorites, one of my best experiences with a game ever. It's one of the first things that really got me into understanding large-scale games and how they would work. And so what I'm kind of doing now is my homage to Mr. Todd and that comparative civ class. It was a huge positive experience for me, and I hope that you are going to have the same fun experience on a different scale with some sci-fi business, and we'll see if you can be more successful with your faction than I was with Poland in the 11th grade. So the faction turn. I'll pop over to the rules. So the faction turn. We're going to talk a little bit about what it looks like. So each faction in the Far Verona universe, each of those factions is made up of a bunch of assets, and they have ratings. They essentially have their own character sheet. So each faction has a number of hit points that measure their cohesion, their morale. It's abstracted, like in Dungeons and Dragons. Their hit points are meaningful, obviously, because when you run out of them, then you go away. And they're based on basically how solid, how together that faction is. So every faction will have hit points that determine sort of their size and their morale and their cohesion. They're going to have 3 stats, right? The 3 stats are force, cunning, and wealth. Their force ratings give them an aptitude at physical violence. These are rated between 1 and 8. They're going to have a cunning faction, which is espionage, infiltration, security, and covert manipulation. And then wealth is how much baller ducats they have, how commercial, scientific, and industrial resources are available to them. Every turn, you're going to have a number of faction credits, right? Fac creds. Fac creds are, again, like hit points, kind of abstracted. They represent general wealth and resources. They're a lot more like resources in Burning Wheel than they are like gold pieces in Dungeons & Dragons, but you'll spend them to buy additional assets. You can also use them to bribe each other. The factions will be able to give them to other factions, and use them to buy things. The factions will accumulate experience points for resolving their goals. Each of the factions will have chosen a goal. Each faction has a homeworld, which represents the place where they're from. They can always purchase assets and take action on their homeworld, even if they lack other assets there. This is a way to kind of like push them back and keep them alive, right? So even if a faction loses stuff elsewhere, on their home world, that is a place where they are from. They're built into that planet. So that's their jam. And then each of them has tags. And we talked about the tags a little bit. We've seen those. These are things that describe that faction. So what's really going to matter when we start looking at the faction turn is their assets. And that's what we're here to do today. We're here to assign all of the assets and lay those out on the board of our imagination, on the great spreadsheet. Assets, just like factions, have hit points. So this is what we'll be attacking and defending with. These are sort of like in Magic the Gathering. These are your summons. These are the cards you play on the table to use to attack your opponent. This can vary from a group of lawyers to infantry to factories to interstellar shipping concerns. This is basically all of the stuff you have that you get to move around the universe. These are your pieces on the board. So they're going to have hit points that can be attacked and destroyed and damaged, dispersed. They'll have a purchase cost. This is how much those assets cost to buy in fact creds. Sometimes they have maintenance costs as well. And then they have a stat for attack, and they have an ability to counterattack. So we'll walk through how that works in just a second, attack and defense, and kind of how we're going to play that out. Assets will, for the most part, be placed somewhere on the board, and we'll run that down on the spreadsheet. And then every asset has a requirement for tech level and for a stat. So when you buy them, you need to own a planet. This is why places like Lovelace have been so hotly discussed in the faction Discord, because if you want to make TL5 assets, you got to have a TL5 planet to build them on. So that's how that's going to go. And we'll talk about buying and stuff when we talk about actions. So when we start doing the actual faction turn stuff, when we do our first faction turn, which I think is on the 28th of May, I think that'll be our first one. When we do that, we're going to go through each faction in order of turns. So after we're done today, after I've laid everything on the board, I'm going to roll randomly to determine the order in which each faction will go. And then I'm going to privately message each faction and say, you are going on turn 5, or you are going on turn 8, or you are going on turn 1. You're first. You won't know what everybody else's faction is doing or when they're going, but you will know at least kind of when you are going to go in the order. Now you can ask, you can spread misinformation about when you're going, that's fine, but you're not going to know what your turn is. So when your turn comes up, and we'll walk through all of these on that stream on the 28th, at the beginning of the turn, the first thing that happens, and God help me, chat, I am going to forget to do this. You have to remind me. Factions gain fact creds equal to half their wealth, rounded up, plus a quarter of their total force and cunning rating. It's this thing here. Just please, for the love of God, help me remember to give them their factions. That's right. You'll get used to me forgetting this, and I'm sure you'll let me not forget. Then maintenance cost is paid. So if you have assets that require maintenance, we'll take those off. I got to do those for every faction. If a faction has no goal at the start of the turn, they'll know, and I'll have to, they'll let me know, and I'll assign them a new goal. We're going to be doing that today too. They have to let me know if they want to abandon their goal, and if they do, they don't get any income, and they don't get a turn, but they get to change their goal. So it's a big cost if you want to abandon a goal midstream, but that's a thing that you can do. And then at the end of the faction turn, and this is the thing that I always love doing, at the end of the faction turn, I'm going to make up a little faction fiction thing, and I'll post it on the forum, and it'll be something in universe. And if you want to do that, like for example, Prism or any of the houses or any faction, if you want to make up your own little news document or record a podcast or make a video, I go for it. I would love to see the way that different factions spin what happens, like losses and victories. We're all going to get to see the rules, but you can put a fictional spin on the faction turn however you want. So every faction turn, every action that you get, you're going to choose to take one of several types of action. So the action list includes the following: attack, buy asset, change homeworld, expand influence, refit asset, repair asset, sell asset, seize planet, or use asset ability. Let's go through those. So, attack is the action that you can see has the most mechanical stuff going on. An attack is the way that you reduce your enemies' actions. You reduce their presence in the universe. You destroy their shit. You get up on them. Attack is a significant action, and this is how it's going to go. This is going to start coming up. Once, I think in a month or two, we're going to start seeing factions overlapping and start attacking each other. But the way that the attacks go is you launch an attack against an enemy faction, right? You have to be able to see them. If you have a stealth asset on a world, it cannot be targeted for an attack until you discover it. To launch an attack, you're going to select one of your own assets on that world, and you're going to target a rival faction with assets on the same world. One at a time, each attacking asset is matched against a defending asset chosen by the defender. Each attacking asset can attack only once per turn, though a defending asset can defend as many times as they wish, assuming it can survive multiple conflicts. So the way that this works, and it's a little bit unclear, but it's my understanding that you choose and this is the way I'm going to rule it, you choose the thing you want to attack. So you might say, the deathless infantry on this planet are going to attack the base of influence of the Houses Minor on the same planet. When you submit that order, I will, 48 hours or so, I think is going to be the timeline, I'm going to tell the faction, you are being targeted by an attack. You're being targeted by an attack on this planet. Who do you want to defend? They'll let me know what they're defending with. It's a bit like Magic the Gathering, right? You can attack, but they will move people in the way, and they'll block essentially. So you choose who you block with. I'll let you know. You tell me who you block with, and then I'll resolve it during the stream. You can, as long as you have a surviving asset, you can do that. You can drop them in and have them. You can have them block. But we'll talk about what happens if they die midway. You can give me a turn. You can give me we'll defend with these guys. If they die, we'll continue defending with these guys. We'll get priorities. You'll have 48 hours to decide all this because the actions will lock 2 days before the faction turn actually occurs. And that's how that'll go. Because once all the actions are locked, there's nothing you can do about it. No one can go back on these things. So I'm not worried about letting you do these things. And yeah, when you attack, all of your attack capable assets can attack on every world. You're basically issuing everyone in the sector, all of our assets that can attack are going to attack, and here's where they're attacking, that sort of thing. So that's how that's going to go. So you choose your asset, and they choose their defender, and one at a time we match them all up. And then once matched, the attacker rolls a d10 and adds the relevant attribute. So for example, a military unit's attack might add force, a cyber ninja might attack cunning, etc. So we'll do that. We're going to roll and add the appropriate thing. The defender does the same thing. They roll a d10 and they add the attribute that the attack targets. So in the instance of the military unit, often military is like force v force. Sometimes it's cunning v cunning. We'll look at the specific assets and see how that goes. If the attacker wins, then the attack is a success. The defending asset suffers damage, and we'll roll that. If the defender has a base of influence on the world, they can opt to let the damage hit the base of influence instead. Again, we'll work all this out in advance. If the asset or base of influence is reduced to 0 hit points, it's lost. Gets tanked, we cut it from the spreadsheet. If the attack misses, if the attack fails, then the defender can apply their counterattack to the attacking asset. If they don't have any counterattack, that's it. A tie means both things happen. So they bonk up against each other, and that's how it goes. Now, a lot of people are asking in chat, the minor houses and the high church are currently under a culture-wide peace treaty not to force attack each other. If one of the houses minor attacks a major house, if a major house attacks another major house or a house minor, if the church attacks anybody, if any of those assets issue a force attack against the other, they are breaking a significant fictional peace treaty, and I will encourage everyone else who's part of that treaty to turn on them. Because that's why we have dueling, right? We've had enough civil wars in the Empire. This is a thing. You don't want to do that. This is a fictional thing, and this can very much result in civil war. Now, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be aware of the fictional ramifications of this situation. Yeah, I mean, you ultimately have control, but if you do this is serious. This is very, very serious, and that's fine. Just don't do it for kicks. Okay, so obviously attack and defense and all of that stuff is going to be, we're going to need to take some care and gentleness with it the first time. The first turn through, I'm going to go nice and slow. We'll make sure that everybody has an opportunity to have figured it out in advance, and we'll take very good care, and we'll get faster and better at it as we go. Attacks are significant stuff. That's a thing. So what else can you do? You can buy assets. So you buy an asset on your homeworld or any planet on which you have a base of influence. So that's what you're doing during the turn. You can buy as many as you can buy one asset. There are assets that allow you like an additional buy, but this action specifically just says you get one, you pay for it. You have to have the sufficient rating and a planet with a TL that allows you to do it. And then that's it. And then you get it. And then it's on the planet or whatever. And the next turn you can attack, defend, use its special benefits, etc. Basically, it's got summoning sickness the first turn that you bring it in. You can change your homeworld. So if your homeworld is not interesting to you anymore, you can bail out. And you can transfer homeworld control to another planet. It takes one turn plus one more for each hex of distance between them. This is serious. This is what House Cygnus did when Gats got bombed. They changed their homeworld to the Imperial Prime, which gave Crux and the other houses time to build up their forces and then hurt them. So yeah. Significant, but possible. Expand influence. Expand influence is the faction buys a base of influence asset on a planet on which they have at least one other asset. So this is how you take control over other planets. When you do that, the faction rolls 1d10 plus cunning against similar rolls by everyone else on the planet. Any of the others that equal or beat that faction get a free shot on the base of influence. So it's quite hard to expand onto a planet other people are on. But if there's nobody else there, it's much easier, right? If there's no other faction there. then you pay 1 fat cred for every hit point you want the base to have, up to a maximum equal to your own maximum hit points for your faction. Bases with a few hit points are easy to get rid of, but they're cheap to build. The thing to remember here is that if a base of influence takes a hit, your hit point, your faction hit points go down. So if you're spread out and you have a bunch out there, you're more likely to lose your faction hit points because you're spread out. You can also bolster existing bases of influence with this action. You can also reduce, you can decrease base hit points, but you won't get a refund for it. This is to pull back if you are being attacked and you don't want an enemy to blow up your own hit points. So like, for example, if you're down to 4 hit points and you have a base of influence with nothing to defend it on a planet where your enemy is, you want to probably expand influence to reduce that base of influence down to nothing so that enemy can't hurt your faction. So there you go. So you can refit your assets, which means changing one asset to any other asset of the same type. So that's a thing you can do. You pay the difference if it's more expensive. The asset has to be on a place you could otherwise buy it. And then it kind of summoning sicknesses that asset once you've got it. So that's a thing you can do. You can repair an asset or repair your faction. So for 1 fat cred, an asset heals points of damage equal to its ruling attribute. So that's pretty good. 1 fat cred can bolster it back up. You can heal more damage, but it costs more fat creds as you go. This is a way to kind of pull back and recover. You can sell an asset to the bank. So if you sell an asset to the bank, you get half the fat cred cost of that asset. We'll talk a little bit about how factions will sell to each other and how you can bribe each other with fat creds, but so don't worry about that right now. Right now you can sell to the bank. And then you can seize a planet. So seizing a planet means becoming the ruling body of that world. You have to destroy all unstealthed assets belonging to anyone who opposes you first. If you can't do it in 1 turn, you lock in for seizing the planet and have to continue either to lay siege or bail out. In this case, the bank is me. I'm the bank in the Monopoly sense, right? So that's this is the thing you can do. You can try to seize the planet. If you succeed, you become the planetary government of that world. The planetary government tag allows you to say yes or no to other people building things or flying into that world. It's a powerful tag for allowances. Seizing the planetary government of Imperial Prime would have been a thing that the Blood Eagle would have done, for example, way back when. So this is a way to grab up worlds. And then lastly, and this is going to be a really, really popular one. Lastly, use asset ability. So if you choose this, all of your assets that have abilities like harvesters, logistic assets that move faction stuff around, intelligence gathering, anything that has a special ability, use asset ability allows you to do that for any and all of your factions that you would like. The use asset ability also is what the House's Miner can use to trigger the space bending properties of Lodestone. So that's how that works. A couple of special things just for our game. If you want, 2 factions can enact business transactions, including bribery. So you could say, hey, Deathless, we're going to give you 3 fat creds to not defend this asset. And then someone else could say, hey, Deathless, we're going to give you 10 fat creds to defend all of our assets on this planet. You can straight up just bribe each other. This takes place in between the turns. It's not an action. All of the bribery will be locked in at the same time the orders are for that turn. So there'll be 48 hours of no more bribes, no more sales. So that's something that'll happen. And then being able to sell assets to other factions. So if you own an asset, you can transfer control and ownership of that asset to another faction. This will require me confirming on both sides. So you'll say, we would like to sell these spaceships that we made in this sector to this faction. It will be public. It'll be made public. And it will transfer. At the beginning of the next action, the next turn, they'll be able to use it just like they owned it. It'll appear in the place where they have it. It'll belong to them, and they can do the thing. So this is a tricky way for factions to place assets where otherwise they might have a hard time getting them. So, for example, if I don't know, if one faction can't get governmental permission to build something, another faction could get permission, build it, and then sell it underneath that permission layer. So this is where the politicking can get a little intense, right? Where you can kind of sneakily bypass some stuff. All the actions, like all of the sales and all of the bribery, is going to be public. So there's no like hiding that you did this, because I'm going to announce it all as it happens. But it is a way to be kind of sneaky. This is how major houses might be able to do war on each other. It is technically not illegal to pay the deathless to blow up someone else's stuff with a force asset. You can't fight each other, noble houses, but you can pay mercenaries to fight each other for you. That's technically legal. It's a loophole in that situation. So yeah, that's kind of how, the reason I keep using Deathless as my example is because that's how that faction operates. Yeah, proxy war, precisely. Yeah. So yeah. So these are the actions. So every month, I'm going to get from you, from your faction representatives, the action you are taking. So that'll be the first like column, basically. Hey, we would like to take the attack action. We would like to take the expand influence action, etc. And then you will tell me what assets are taking those actions. There may be some special cases. I may have some questions for you. We may need to make up or come up with some specific stuff. I have a document, it's available in the Discord, of specific rulings, and I will keep adding to it as we go, so as things come up. So questions, I've seen a few questions. Are houses allowed to use force assets to defend? Yes. Yeah, defending doesn't break... defending doesn't break that stuff. It's fine. Defending is okay. If somebody sends an asset after you and you defend with force, you are allowed. That's all right. Defense is always defense. That's okay. What happens if the Deathless takes money to attack an asset they're also being paid to defend? Fuck them, I guess. Like, the Deathless have to be really careful about stabbing people in the back, because a mercenary group that stabs you in the back is not going to get paid to keep protecting your back, right? So they need to be careful what they do. And then also people were asking, like, if someone agrees to something, do they have to do it? Fuck no. No, of course not. Like, in diplomacy, half the fun is being like, yes, I promise I will defend you. No, I'm not going to defend them. Fuck that shit, right? Leaving people open, that kind of thing. The other thing is, if you attack, but someone gets to move before you and they move an asset away, yes, you would lose that attack opportunity. You don't get to chase them. There are a few instances like transit web, because transit web targets worlds. So like if you're targeting lodestone with a transit web and lodestone moves, as long as it's within range, you target the world. So you don't lose your movement action. Again, all of these clarifications, they're on my rules doc. You can check them out there. The link is in the Discord. It's pinned in the general channel, I think. So yeah, that's how that works. Each faction will have its own goal. You've chosen them, and this is how you get experience. So just like the player characters, you're going to have things. You're going to tell me this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it. You take your actions, and when you do that, then you get points. You can use those points to increase your stats, and this is a way to just know, like, what are we after? This is how I go. At the end of the game, the faction that gets the most experience points, I don't know, you win. You win the game. You get an achievement. Everyone in that faction gets 10 esports dollars, and congratulations, you did it. Yeah, so you win. You win the faction turn if you get the most experience. I don't know. Survive. That's the most important thing. So the faction goals can be things like destroying a number of assets of rival factions. It can be about seizing a particular planet, right? It can be about just building new influence. It can be about just causing damage. It can be about not attacking for a certain number of turns, putting stealth assets around, and we'll see what everybody's goals are when we put that together. Quick question from Iron Fist. What about a turn order conflict? Faction A wants to attack Faction B's assets. B goes first and moves the target and has no assets left on the planet. Does Faction A just lose their turn? Yeah. Yeah, you don't, that's it. It's just too bad. This is like, again, driving from diplomacy. if you attack and you don't have support, you just bounce, right? That's absolutely, they'll lose that attack, but you're taking the attack action elsewhere probably. So that's how it goes. So there's a table on 217, at least in my copy of Stars Without Number, and that's where you can find all these goals and how much they're worth.